character, either beloved or more obscure, and just kinda make them worse. In more small and subtle ways with Zeno's design, or in more obvious ways with this abomination they want me to call MODOK. Marvel seems to be a bit cowardly when it comes to faithfully adapting the source material. They rely a little too much on improvising everything that aids a character like Taskmaster. You pick a villain or hero, flatten them as far as you can, take what little iconography you need to make people go like, and put them in a mediocre, over-designed suit. I get what they're going for here, but we need more capes and cloaks in these movies, man. I can make a video for so many characters like this. If you'd want to see that, let me know. But right now, Hulk is top of mind. As we had something good earlier on, they went the lazy route to make Endgame work. Marvel just keeps improvising as they go along and patching things together later. Well, there is a funny guy named Taskmaster, the fan favorite. How about we make her a mute villain with no personality, instead of focusing on highlighting on the one thing Taskmaster has, this photogenic memory? Well, instead, give her some sci-fi bullshit brain chip, this fugly ass helmet, and make her move like a generic Terminator. How many generic, cold-blooded killer assassins do we need? Like, you could have used someone nobody cares about like Spy Master. It's just complete ass. And after Black Widow ends, she's free from the mind control. You could have given her a personality, a story arc, something to make her interesting. But no, she just gets killed off in Thunderbolts in the most disrespectful way possible. And while it works for the movie, it's such a disservice to the character. I'll say this though, this is not one of those videos where I say the word woke a million times and spend 90% of it bitching about the fact that they made Taskmaster a woman. I could care less, and if it was done differently, it could have worked better for me. This is me going through what Taskmaster has been like in the comics, his highlights, backstory, just overall giving you a picture of what I like about him, and hopefully what you will like about him too. I still love the MCU at the end of the day, and will defend them when the slander gets a little too outrageous, but here's how Marvel absolutely wasted Taskmaster. Taskmaster, or Tony Masters, first appeared in Avengers 195. Then we get his backstory in 196, drawn by the great George Perez. If you're familiar with the character, you get the gist. He's a mercenary who's born with a photographic memory, able to copy any sort of martial arts, weapon skills, and even athletic skills. He watched one football game and became his high school's quarterback right after. Now, none of this should be a surprise, as we got the ability in the movies, kind of, even though they needlessly complicated it with the brain chip and that fuck-ass helmet. Overall, I can't really be mad. What's important to know is how he speaks. Taskmaster, like a lot of comic characters, has his dialogue written in a way where you assume an accent. Personally, because his name is Tony, I just think Italian New Yorker. But regardless of the fact, the dude is funny. His first few bits of dialogue has him saying shit like shuggy and sweets. He tells Wasp that she and the others will make the perfect visual for his next class, Dismemberment 101. Now throughout this video, you'll see his comedic side shine more and more. However, imagine my surprise when the movies who are famous for quippy dialogue and comedic moments chose to turn this guy into a mute with a horrific and tragic backstory. Taskmaster, while a killer, is a pretty lighthearted character most of the time. Of course, you can take comedic characters and make them darker and more dramatic, which we'll get into later. However, when you take away that part of their personality and give them no personality, that kinda sucks. The second big part of Taskmaster, which often isn't talked about too much, is him being a teacher, which should be obvious given his name, but whatever. He just wants to make the most amount of money possible with the least amount of heat. So he likes to secretly train all these villains and give them the skills of the heroes they fight, like Spider-Man, Captain America, or Iron Fist, which is incredibly useful. Now you should read the rest of his appearance here. This is my favorite thing villains should always do, which is to say fuck this shit and get out of there. He even calls Jocasta baby buns, which furthers my idea that he should have an Italian New Yorker accent. Now skipping ahead, an important part and somewhat tragic is that he has to forget memories he has of his real life to store the skills he acquires, which means he has a finite cap on what he can actually do. If someone has a new fighting style, in order for him to copy it, he'd have to forget something like Captain America's shield throwing or Spider-Man's gymnastics. While that may be sad, the benefits vastly outweigh the small drawback, for a mercenary at least. For a human being who needs friends, family, and a life, it kinda sucks. In Taskmaster 2010 issue 2, we get this really cool look into his psyche. Tony narrates, "We're walking down a street and think, do I take a left here or keep going? Then it hits you like a kick to the gut. Keep going where? Where am I coming from? Who am I?" You see Tony confused and lost, and then we see him fake his way through a conversation of someone who clearly recognizes him. "I'm a master of intimate sounding, utterly superficial chit-chat, and I wear a mask 24/7 so people can use my expression to tell when I'm surprised, which is most of the time." Taskmaster, while being able to attain almost anything, cannot remember a single thing about his life and is in a constant state of confusion. The next page explains how when he sees a payphone, he has this muscle memory to call someone, that someone being the org. He tells them, "I don't know who I am," and they say, "No reason for you to. The org knows." The org is a surrogate memory, and it's how he's able to function with very little personal information. Remember this for later in the video, as this 4-issue run ends in such a fantastic way, and I want to save the best for last. However, if you're like me and you were pissed at how easy it was for Taskmaster to die in the MCU, let's talk about some insane moments, feats, the highlights of Taskmaster. Now, like most comic characters, Taskmaster has some crazy durability. The MCU had the mask be so weak that a pistol was able to go through it, killing her. However, Tony was able to tank a sniper rifle to the chest in the comics and still be able to fight. You can't be one of the world's greatest fighters if you got a paper mache mask that can't block shit. Not only is his iconic skull mask way cooler looking here, but he's also able to get blown up by a grenade and again still be alive. What's even more insane is that Miles Morales' Spider-Man was able to Venom punch the sky, and he was still talking shit after that. No, durability isn't the most impressive thing with every single enhanced human or even regular human character is super tough, so let's look at his combat feats. Karnak is a human with a really dope power set and even doper design. He can see the flaw in everything, meaning physical, emotional, psychological, whatever. They call him the Shatterer. He can even use this to shatter one's beliefs, and on top of that he spent years training at a place called the Tower of Wisdom, so he is not to be fucked with. Imagine my surprise, however, in Secret Warriors 2017, issue 4, we get to this exchange. Taskmaster says to Karnak that he's been waiting to fight him for years, and Karnak just calls him a sad person. However, right after that, on the page after the next, Taskmaster just knees him in the head and downs him instantly, essentially one-shotting the Inhuman designed to fight. How embarrassing. What's even worse is that after a while, when everyone gets captured, I figured Karnak would help the team escape, find a weakness in the enemy, break the restraints, something. But no, he lets the 10-year-old Moon Girl do all the work for him while he's still unconscious and has to get smacked awake. Generational shame, man. Now I know I just glazed Spidey in the last video, but I gotta bring up an older comic to really put in perspective how busted Taskmaster can be. So this is Marvel Team Up 103. Peter is sneaking around this evil lair, and as he thinks he'll finally get some answers, he realizes he just walked into a trap, one set by Taskmaster. You see, Taskmaster prides himself as a teacher, and what better way to teach his students than to get a real-life hero to fight? He says, "Today, I'm gonna show my graduating class that superheroes ain't as tough as they're cracked up to be." Basically, he's calling you a bitch, Peter, so you better step up. Spider-Man realizes this and goes to punch him, which he doesn't even flinch, just lets Peter's momentum knock him into the shield. Thankfully, Spider-Man recovers quickly and kicks him. Taskmaster recovers as well, almost like he's copying him. Spider-Man tries swinging around, but Taskmaster makes a Captain America move to cut his web. Peter then tries to net him with a web, but then he pulls a Black Knight move to bypass it. It's getting rough for Peter, all these people are watching you lose to this guy. Now after Taskmaster tries this judo move, Spider-Man has had enough and says, "You can copy fighting styles, but there is no way you can copy my strength," which is correct. Unfortunately for Peter though, Taskmaster has been watching Daredevil a little too much, and he throws a regular cane at the wall, ricocheting across the room and eventually hitting Spider-Man right at the back of his head. Now this is an older comic, so I don't think this could happen today, but Jesus Christ, Peter, the guy tells you his move, and instead of moving out of the way, you let it hit you. On top of that, his spider sense took the day off, I guess, because this should have been an easy dodge for you. Taskmaster then says, "You see, class, these jokers and the costumes ain't all that awesome when you know how to handle them." Sheesh, this is pretty bad, but if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'd know how much I love to dunk on a certain character. Frank Castle, the bummiest dude in NYC, despite the fact that he has no powers, any exceptional training or mental aptitude, he somehow has insanely stupid plot armor. But let me be the bearer of great news. That is not happening today. This is Deadpool vs. Punisher issue 4. Taskmaster and Frank are fighting. Doesn't matter why, comic book shit. Frank tells him, "Taskmaster, huh? Heard you were a joke." Ouch, being called a joke from this guy? That's gotta sting. Taskmaster misses 2 attacks and then gets thrown to the wall. He recovers by kneeing Frank in the chest and then disarms his knife. Taskmaster palms this guy's face as he was telling him why he doesn't go for guns. And then he dodges a right hook effortlessly and says, "This way is much more fun, to study a man's strengths, his weaknesses, and use the former to exploit the latter. Special forces can tell just by the way you move." Taskmaster, always trying to learn new fighting styles, is just having fun here. It was said earlier they've been fighting for a long time, but only after Punisher calls Taskmaster a joke does it start to get wicked. Frank gets kneed in the back and thrown on the ground as he tries to rationalize how Taskmaster knows his fighting style of special forces. Punisher rolls backward to dodge the slam move and just takes one right under the chin as Tony says, "You move in quick, don't let a guy get his bearings. Overwhelm his defenses with quick devastating strikes." And then, once he's reeling, the coup de grace. And we just see panel after panel of the most disrespectful punches, kicks, and elbows, all leading up to a knee to the chin. As Frank gets his shit rocked, Tony reads him like a book. It makes sense, a guy like you who's just meat and brains and bone, trying to look like a hard ass in a world full of rock people and winged gods. He knows Frank has to overcompensate without any powers, and has to act a certain way to deter people from trying him, because if they do, and I mean really any D-lister with powers, the Punisher is donezo. While all of this is so incredibly embarrassing for Frank, this final nail in the coffin does it for me. Let me ask you a question, Castle. If I'm such a joke, why don't I hear you laughing? Huh? No? Didn't think so. Oof. God damn, I love to see Punisher lose. It makes my day. Unfortunately, this issue ends with Deadpool coming in to save the day. While Taskmaster actually battles the fuck out of Wade, Punisher wakes up and they 2v1 him like some punk-ass bitches. Run the ones, you cowards! He was holding his own there too for a moment, but he gets knocked off the side of the ship, and this little brat cuts his ladder, letting him fall into the ocean. Now I could sit here all day and tell you how cold Taskmaster is. He has way more impressive feats. These are just the ones that I think are really cool. However, what I find more interesting is his personal story. While he doesn't remember much of it, I hope you remember the bit I said before about Taskmaster 2010, because we're getting right back into it. This is Taskmaster 2010, a rare look into the world of a mercenary from the perspective of the man himself, Tony Masters. Now I spoke about issue 2 as it has the neat bit of character work explaining how he operates as a man with virtually no personal memories. However, let's rewind back to issue 1, as we'll need to explain a few things so the later chapters make sense. In issue 1, we start at this diner where Tony Masters, out of costume, with no sense of living where he is talking to his waitress, Mercedes. While they're chopping it up, we see various teams outside waiting for the right time to strike, to collect a bounty on Taskmaster. We got AIM, Hydra, and so many more. This is the engine of the story. There's a $1 billion bounty on his head, and even though Taskmaster trained all these guys, they're still villains at the end of the day, and we'll try to cash that shit in. Tony gets tipped off by a former student who wants to kill him with dignity and tells him to put on his suit. Then his former student, who is a Hydra member, reminisces on their histories together, but unfortunately Tony cannot remember it. Just as Mercedes comes out of the kitchen, it's time for all the mercenaries to do their job, and Tony effortlessly disarms his former student and goes to work. All the organizations start fighting each other, trying to reach Taskmaster. He just embarrasses them. We see Mercedes escape the diner, and then he accesses this AIM tech to see what they have on him. And when Mercedes walks into her apartment to find these goobers called the Inquisition, Taskmaster saves her life, telling her that now she's been attached to the bounty just for associating with him. Okay, so in issue 2, we see Mercedes and Tony are in this dope chase scene, where these skull guys chase down the plane and Mercedes low-key is booking it. After escaping them, they go out to a plane, which crash lands right into the skull guy's secret base. Plot twist is, this dude's name is Dawn of the Dead, and even though Tony can't remember him, Taskmaster once knew him. The head honcho explains how Taskmaster's training helped him so much, and how he's going to offer him sanctuary while everyone else is looking for him. Tony enters his temple where he gets a memory back of how he chose the skull helmet. It was in honor of Santa Muerte, Senora de las Sombras, essentially Lady Death. When he comes back outside, they're trying to kill Mercedes, as they need something to show the org so they can get the bounty. Taskmaster, in all his wisdom, barters for her, saying he'll do a huge favor in order to save her life. He'll fill in for their missing guitarist. What a sacrifice. We see them play and Mercedes is being held up outside. Now what's crazy is that she knocks out the skull guy, grabs his gun and lights him up, unbeknownst to the band playing inside as their music is too loud. Right as they're about to hit the solo, Mercedes, the MVP, comes in on his truck, crashing the party and saving Tony. Later, as the chase sequence happens, Tony unmasks the Dawn of the Dead, and it's some gringo who tells Tony, "Hey, why are you judging me? I'm ex-SHIELD just like you," which is news to Taskmaster. Dawn thinks he's playing dumb and continues, but right before Taskmaster can get some crucial info out of him, the car gets his tire shot, and Dawn falls to his death. Tony just kneels and mutters, "I wasn't done with." Damn. I really feel for the guy here. This melancholic mood continues and Mercedes is like, "You've been less of a wisecrack since we escaped the Dawn." Taskmaster tells her he's just now realizing he never goes to a hospital when he forgets. He doesn't go to the cops. It's almost as if instinctually he knows he's guilty of something. Not just training villains, but something worse. Mercedes tries to look to spirits and says, "The Don said you were ex-SHIELD, means you were a good guy once." Tony solemnly says that she's one of the good ones, and that's why you can't have her be swallowed up by this. He continues, "But me? Different story. I can change allegiance as many times as I want. If I always revert back to default factory settings, it don't mean squat." Tony has no personal memories, principles, any real friends, at least those he remembers. He's barely a